Hello and welcome to this virtual roundtable from Foodservice Consulting Society International, FCSI. Today, looking at a subject that has become increasingly pertinent to our industry in recent years, the future of water treatment in food service. I'm Michael Jones, Editorial Director of FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine, and this roundtable is kindly sponsored by Pentair and will address how innovation is shaping water treatment systems in modern food service operations. I'm joined today by our expert panelists, an exceptional food service consultant and a senior executive from Pentair with vast experience in this area. I will now ask each of them to introduce themselves and to tell us a little bit about their business and their area of expertise. Laura, can we start with you first, please?
Sure. My name is Laura Lentz. I'm with Culinary Advisors. We are a medium-sized firm in the Maryland area as our head office. We have projects all over the country and the world, although I'll say most of our project work is kind of in the middle Atlantic core, which is probably typical for most of us. We are a firm that practices in all market segments because of our location, well, and a number of other things, also being a woman-owned firm. About a good segment of our business comes from government work, particularly out of Washington, D.C., but we have healthcare and higher ed. Those are sort of my larger practice groups, and workplace, as well as schools, prisons, psychiatric facilities, you name it.
You name it. Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Welcome. And Cortney, please.
Yes. Hi. So I'm Cortney Scharenberg. I'm the technical training manager for Pentair. Everpure is one of the brands that people might be familiar with. So Pentair is an all water treatment company. We do all kinds of different water treatment, from manufacturing and water, municipal water treatment to pool and spa, residential. But then I work specifically on the food service side, which is obviously what we're going to talk about today. So we have a whole division that's just food service and commercial. Everyone says they want water treatment to be easy, but unfortunately, it's never that easy, right?
Fantastic. Well, Cortney, thank you. Now, Cortney, you set it up beautifully there. Everyone wants water treatment to be easy. Can you give us an overview of the impact that having an efficient, high-performing water treatment system should be having on a modern food service operation?
Yes, so it definitely depends on what your application is. So what are we treating, right? What type of equipment is it? And then the water quality. So if you put the proper piece of equipment on that meets the water quality and the demands of that equipment, then you should have increased product quality. So nice, taste profile across that piece of equipment or multiple pieces of equipment, and then equipment protection. So again, it really depends on what the water quality is and then what the treatment is, but you're going to have reduced scale buildup, reduced, if not zero, corrosion, and then for ice equipment, that would be reduced slime buildup. I think there's a misconception that they would think, oh, I never have to delime the machine, or I never have to descale, or never have to descale, delime, or clean an ice machine. But it's about getting like more of a planned maintenance schedule, not necessarily a no maintenance schedule, right? So I think we have to sort of, help people understand what they're actually going to get out of it. But the proper water treatment will definitely give you better taste profile and better equipment protection.
Excellent summation. Thank you, Cortney. Laura, from your perspective then as a consultant, how are you advising your clients to invest in a good water treatment system? Why does this all matter to them?
Well, it's really important. Oftentimes I'll go into like starting up a project and go see an existing kitchen, and they're talking to you about what they like and what they don't like and what they want and what works well. And, we try and kind of pull out that information from clients when we first start working with them. And many times what I hear is, we hate this dish machine. It never works. It doesn't satisfy, all the things. It's constantly down. And oftentimes I'll find, and combi ovens can be the same. I think sometimes people are, I don't want a combi oven, don't give me one, or the steamer's always broken, we don't want that. And you kind of peel back the layers of the onion, what kind of water do you have? What kind of treatment? And usually I'm going to start asking that question when I see the lime growing out of the machines and the equipment, and it's kind of a red flag. But but people don't quite, I think, connect sometimes the dots to how important good water, balanced water can be to the life of the equipment. And if I can spend a couple $100 periodically throughout the year to make a, $100,000 dish machine last so much longer, twice the time, whatever the measurement might be, why wouldn't I do that? So it's kind of one of these sort of invisible, for lack of better words, but things that you don't necessarily see or think about, and they aren't top of mind, but they can make a huge difference for clients. So the other piece of it is just warranties on equipment, which kind of falls in line behind taking care of it. If you really want to have a good life on your equipment and warranty it, then I'm advising clients, you definitely have to be thoughtful about your water treatment. And the last thing that I think people don't quite realize is just how local water can be. So even we had a client one time that had 2 towers on either side of the Beltway. And from one building to the other, the water was dramatically different. And so it's also surprising to me that from one water source to another, or even within the same water source, it can vary quite a bit. And so all the more important for there not to be sort of a universal solution, but advising clients on looking local and thinking about a specific place and a specific project. And, obviously that applies to workplace or healthcare systems where they have multiple units, any kind of multi-unit food service operation.
Right.
Yeah. And we try to get people to understand that exactly. I mean, that's a really good point that you brought up. Water quality is different everywhere and it varies greatly. Like you said, it can be across the street, down the road. In Chicago, we're known to have good water quality, but over time, those problems do change. There are things like the use of salt on roads in the wintertime. That salt goes into the water supply. So right. Chloride levels go up over time, and those chlorides are the primary mineral that actually corrodes your hot equipment. So there's a lot that can happen. Water chemistry is pretty fun, but it can be pretty complicated, and your average operator doesn't understand. A lot of times they think we're just trying to sell them this expensive thing, but getting through that warranty life cycle is a big piece of it, because if you don't treat the piece of equipment properly, a lot of the manufacturers have started having really tight water specs that if you don't meet that spec, they'll void your warranty. So you're not getting a new piece of equipment while it's under warranty if they've deemed it to be a water problem. And that's happened more so on the hot side than the cold side, but we're seeing it increase everywhere.
Really
it's funny. Sorry.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, it's funny you say that too, because so it's been about a year that we've been living in a new house. We moved and we have a well system. We're out in the country now and there's wells everywhere. And nothing has brought to my mind more to the forefront of my mind that it is so important to watch after it. So we're on a well. And if anyone ever knows anything about a well system, the typical water treatment is to put a softener on it. Every house around us has softeners. Our water has the exact opposite problem. So we have a pretty shallow well, although we get a ton of water, but we have super acidic water. So I recently just went to, we installed a chemical feed pump to actually add base to our water. It's so the opposite of softening it, essentially, in order to be able to balance it out. And I was calling a plumber every 2 months with a water pipe or threads getting stripped or different things like that. And then to your point, we have a neighbor down the street, 4 houses, who has a RO system in the basement with 300 gallons of water storage because they're out on the street front and they get a ton of the salt water side. So it's kind of, I digress a little bit and go down a rabbit hole, but it's just amazed me how fascinating water really is and how different it can be for everyone, even in the same little local community, much less businesses out on the street.
Yeah, that varies. It's kind of staggering. Sorry, go ahead there, Courtney.
I just wanted one more point to this. We do take water for granted when we turn on the tap that we can drink it and be safe, right? I mean, Michael just drank his water, right? You're not going to die from drinking that water, thank God, right? But obviously there's parts of the world that people still can get very sick and die from their water supply. But what we have to remember in food service is safe water or potable water doesn't necessarily make good coffee, or it doesn't make good ice, or it doesn't, it does corrode our equipment, or it does have scale buildup. So safe, healthy drinking water is one thing, right? But water for our equipment and water that's going to get people coming back in the door and getting that soda or getting that $5, $6, $7, $8 coffee is a whole different ballgame.
So as an extension of that, Cortney, how is the taste profile of water, and also ice as well, how is that influenced by the equipment that's used to treat it? Do you want to talk a little bit about how that taste profile can be improved, can be managed, treated better?
Definitely. So taste profile, when we talk about taste, it really can come from a couple different avenues, I guess. So we have organic contaminants that are going to contribute to taste. And that would be anything in the water that was once living that is now dead and decaying. So plant matter, dead animals, dead, that fishy taste and smell. I always tell people in my training is dead squirrels, any of those taste, odors, and colors that can come from that organic material. There's other things that can be dead in the water too, but we'll just go with squirrels.
We're all going to be running to get massive water treatment systems.
These are things we have to consider, right?
Right. Yeah, it's true. I mean, so organic contaminants, those are naturally occurring contaminants, right? They get there just by the process of, it's water, and that's how we get our water. So they can give us what we call taste, odor, and color, or T and O. So carbon is really good at cleaning that up. Then we have our intentionally introduced contaminants. We have disinfectants. So primarily chlorine is what we're familiar with. There's a secondary disinfectant out there called chloramine, which is actually quite a buzzword these days. All it is, in the last step of the water treatment process, we put in our disinfectant. And the disinfectant is used to deliver water to you safely. So that would be chlorine as our primary disinfectant. But chloramine is where they pour in chlorine and then ammonia as a secondary disinfectant. And they stick together and form their own molecule called chloramine. It is, works just like chlorine. It's just more stable. It actually can give us a stronger taste profile of that pool smell. It can interact with artificial sweeteners, the ammonia does, in sodas, and just causes like a kind of a metallic taste, dirty taste that is really off-putting. And it's a much stronger taste profile in ice and drinking water as well for the chloramine. But both of those give us, an off taste. We don't want those. In coffee, the chlorine and the chloramine can actually oxidize with the organic matter in the coffee and give us like an earthy or moldy taste. So that's also a bad experience. So that's the organics, the disinfectants, and then we have minerals. So the mineral side of it, or the total dissolved solids, can impact the taste profile as well. That minerals are what we actually recognize as hydrating taste in our water, this water tastes good, this one brand versus this other brand, the mineral profile is going to be different. And that's why we recognize that. But then when you put those minerals in coffee, especially, the minerals are what are actually extracting the colors and the aromas and the oils from the coffee grounds. So if you have too much of them, you're going to get maybe too much of certain types of extraction, too much oil or not enough oil. If you have too little, you're going to have, too little extraction or a weaker cup of coffee. So there's a lot that can happen there. You might get a weak crema. As far as fountain beverage goes, there's a few types of minerals that actually cause soda to be flat. That would be the alkaline minerals. So things like carbonates and bicarbonates. So bicarbonates are like your Tums in the water. So think of your soda having Tums in it. So you don't want too much of that, get flat soda. Ice, there's different minerals that can cause ice to not form properly or melt too quickly. High sodium levels are going to do that. If you have too much mineral, you're actually going to get a cloudy ice cube. So there's a whole handful of things that can happen for the taste profile side of it. And it's really going to come down to, say that again. I'm sorry.
About getting that balance right.
Yes, getting the balance right. You know, the colder applications are usually a little more forgiving when it comes to issues with minerals, but they're all going to have issues with taste and odor and disinfectants as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Courtney.
Mhm.
Laura, to your earlier point that you've been to see clients and you've seen the limescale buildup occurring behind the dishwasher and the steamer and the combi, and you realize it's a water issue that's affecting things here. How, in your experience, can correctly treating water ensure for a longer lifetime of other pieces of equipment?
How? So I think, you know, and Courtney, you kind of said it earlier at one point, which is about preventive maintenance. So I think it starts with really getting to, I want to say, the culture of the company or the culture of the client. So, and what I mean by that is when I'm first talking to a client, for some of them, a priority is cost. Mm-hmm. For some of them, a priority is labor. So, you know, we do not have the capability of, you know, really being on top of our preventive maintenance plan. We want it as simple as possible. We want it easy to go about, you know, that type of thing. Others are intense about, like a coffee bar, for example, might be very intense about the specific taste profile that they want for each individual piece of equipment. So they might have, you know, we want exactly this espresso machine water filter, then we want this filter for our tea, and we want, you know, and so there might be major variations and specific preferences. And so, you know, they're kind of all about taste and customer experience. So the clients always have different priorities. And I think it's important to be thoughtful when you're choosing equipment about what is the right priority for the person. Some of them, a client I had last year, you know, they wanted a whole building water filter system. So for them, the key was, and I really think it almost started with, on every floor where we normally see water filters, we want bottle fillers, and we want it to be cold, really good filtered water. We want them at every, you know, pantry, break station. And then we used it for, we're able to use it for the equipment in the servery. But to be honest, and just to say this, we had to go through every piece of equipment and say, okay, is this filtration going to meet the manufacturer requirements? And for two different pieces of equipment, we still had an additional filter on top of that, seeking to get the right type of quality and mix that they were looking for, or that the equipment needed. So I think that's kind of the first piece of it. And then, you know, no matter what we do on the front end, on the design side, I think a lot of it is about having effective preventive maintenance in place, being, you know, cognizant, and that clients are going back and looking at and figuring out, you know, it really starts with how often do we need to change these water filters. Sometimes I've had clients say, look, as best you can, I want to be changing my filters every 3 months. And so give me, you know, size all my filters based on the water use you think I'm going to have, so that every 3 months I can roll through and change them all out and be done. So, you know, there's just those types of, I think, key pieces. One, that the design works for the client and it's going to be something they're going to be able to maintain and take care of. And two, that the preventive maintenance is in place, that they are actively understanding what water filtration is and what's going to be asked of them in order to keep that equipment up and running for, you know, for a much longer period of time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Courtney, we've heard a really good, I guess, kind of grounding there in the challenges that are facing clients and also manufacturers and consultants as well, but also the opportunities this represents to how you can improve the water within a food service operation. But what are some of the key trends that you and your team are seeing in terms of water treatment? How is this all evolving? How is it changing?
That's a good question. So to Laura's point, when she said you have maintenance staff that wants to change every 3 months, for instance. So the industry standard for sizing filtration is actually 6 months. You know, if you have filter clogging, for instance, prior to 6 months, then a couple of things happen. That's kind of a red flag for us. You either have undersized filtration for the actual flow rate needs of the equipment, or you have dirt clogging clogging your system. Maybe there's dirt coming from the plumbing, there was construction next door, something like that, or the actual water quality has too much particulate in it, or what we call suspended solids that can clog filters. So there's a handful of other things that can do that as well. So, undersizing is a problem, but even that whole 6-month change out, right? What we're seeing is the desire to have less change outs. And I don't know if it necessarily was driven by the consumer or if it's been driven by the manufacturers of water filtration. But one of the big trends we see out there now is high capacity carbon filtration. So how am I going to get more life out of that carbon filter before I have to change it? And that's been a big selling feature between competitors. Oh, well, you only have to change mine out once a year, or you're going to get, 25,000 gallons out of this one filter. When we have higher capacity filters, not only do we get to change them less often, but you can build bigger systems in one place. You could have multiple pieces of equipment on one system. You can go up to 100,000, 200,000 gallons on one filter system. And that kind of thing didn't happen, in the past with past carbon technologies. So that's a big one. We also have the need for being more energy efficient. So in reverse osmosis, right? Reverse osmosis is how we actually remove minerals from water. So when the minerals are causing us a problem, there's a handful of different types of technologies we can do to that. We can either use an ion exchange technology where we're removing one mineral and putting something in its place, like water softening, or what we call decarbonization. Anybody in the coffee world might have seen decarbonization technology before. Yeah. And then there's reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis is where we actually strip minerals out. I guess in ion exchange technology, there's not a lot of change. But in reverse osmosis, they want to be more energy efficient. So if they do use electricity, you might see ones that don't use electricity, but they're trying to make more water with just using different types of pumps that don't require electricity. And then you have ones that are trying to be more efficient with how fast they're making water, because RO is known to be, I guess, wasteful, for lack of better terms, because it does put water down the drain. And the reason you have to put water down the drain is when you're rejecting minerals, they have to go somewhere, or else they'll clog that very expensive membrane. So they have to go down the drain. So how do we get more water through that membrane faster and have less water go down the drain? So that's a big trend these days with RO, as well as mineral addition and blending. So again, back to the coffee world, these people, they want their water to be just right. It's the I guess the Goldilocks of water is what they're looking for. So they want to add specific minerals back in to just have a better coffee extraction, or we blend minerals back in to raise the overall total dissolved solids so that we can get that good extraction. And then in the steam world, we want to add just enough minerals back in so that our RO water isn't aggressive. Because what happens if you take out too much mineral, now that water wants to find minerals somewhere, and it does it in your metals. So we want to have just enough that it doesn't do that. And then even potentially get the water balanced so it doesn't scale or corrode. Yeah. So it gets a little tricky out there, but that's what I'm seeing, at least as far as trends.
So that's really interesting. And I know certainly in my part of the world, in Europe, reverse osmosis is finally getting the traction that it's had in the US for some time. It's finally seeming to be breaking through. Laura, how would you see those trends impacting the kind of clients that you work with? Are you seeing those already hitting? Is that exactly what you're seeing?
I am. And yes, for the most part, although I'm pretty sure Cortney's going to have a much wider sampling of things than I do. But I am. I'm seeing, although it's still probably less than I would expect, but I am seeing more clients go to whole building filtration systems. And then so we're looking at each piece of equipment and figuring out what they're filtering and kind of going through it that way. I think that just is about who a client is and whether it makes sense for them.
Yeah.
I am also seeing kind of a preference towards point of use sometimes. I don't know if this exactly makes sense, Courtney, but sometimes they just, it's kind of nice to, I guess, know there's a filter and it's for a piece of equipment and it's all tied together. And I'm so sometimes, we've been headed in the direction of a large filter that's going to be able to, let's say, do all the combis and if you have a steamer type of thing, right? And then we've seen some clients, kind of come back from that and really want individual filters tied for everything so that they can keep track of it. They also sometimes, I hear this less and less, but for a while too, it was, we don't necessarily want to pay for all this additional piping through all the building. We want that to be right at the point of use. So it honestly has kind of seemed to go back and forth where you would think there would be more of a, this is the way we're seeing it go all the time. So I don't know if that's what you see on a national level as much, Courtney, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think it just depends on what kind of building we're working with, right? So point of entry, for an entire building has a tendency to be focused on water softening, maybe large capacity carbon for just the better quality drinking water. When we get into food service, water softening is actually not a good solution for any food service equipment except dish machines. So the sodium that ends up in the water, in the ion exchange process with water softening, is actually causing negative problems to all food service equipment, with, like I said, with the exception of dish machines. So we try to have that conversation with people as much as possible to say, if you're going to put a water softener in your entire building, let's say it's a hospital, right? That would be a common thing to do. They're going to put the water softener on the hot and cold side of the building because they want to protect all the plumbing in the building. And, then you've got, soft water going to your toilets and your bathroom sinks. Then we would ask them to put a non-softened cold line to all the food service equipment. And then you still want to do point of use there. Because if we have to remove sodium, we have to use reverse osmosis to do it. And then that gets to be a very expensive solution. So, we do see it a little bit back and forth, but I guess what I am seeing too is just the higher use of reverse osmosis. And I don't know if you see this, Laura, especially steam equipment, because those manufacturer specs are getting tighter and tighter because they're getting smarter about water. And when the industry moved from boiler-based units to boilerless, there was no tank of water for all these problems to sit in anymore, right? All the corrosion and all the scale used to happen in the boiler. Now they don't happen there; they happen right in the cabinet. So they're kind of catching up and understanding, well, this corrosion that's happening is a water problem. So how do we prevent that from happening? And they're partnering with water treatment companies, or they're requiring water samples to be done before they install the unit. So we end up seeing, I tell people all the time, it's like 80 to 85% of the country, the water quality would actually require reverse osmosis for steam cooking equipment based on chloride levels and what we know to cause corrosion at high temperatures, and also just based on what the manufacturer specs are these days.
If I can ask you a question, not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious because, one of the things I spend a lot of time, us as consultants spend a lot of time trying to figure out is, what is our role and what should we be doing to help our engineers? We know our role is about food service equipment and helping our engineering team understanding water, power demand, what's required, where drain should go, like all those good things, right? But when it comes to water, sometimes I'll talk to engineers and I want to say they feel, plumbing engineers will feel very sort of expert in the matter. And we're putting on a softener. Sometimes we have X, Y, and Z types of systems. What are the questions that you wish that consultants were either facilitating or helping, or, do you have advice or things you're like, I just wish the consultants would start to ask this question more of engineers? Because, it's important for us to be a good resource connection between the equipment and then our engineering team, who, in my opinion, in a lot of ways is sort of our first client, right? You know, there's other levels, but that's our role. So what are if I can put you on the spot and ask the question, you know, is there something out there that you're like, we need to be asking this more, we need to be, you know?
That's a really good question. You know, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? They think they know all about it, right? Food service is unique. Food service equipment has unique needs. You know, I worked actually on the residential side for a while as well. And I was working with some extremely intelligent, actual water experts, water treatment experts on the residential and high volume commercial space. You know, these are the people that treat for arsenic and radon and all these other things that are real health issues, right? But there's specific things in food service that we deal with that are not dealt with in more like major plumbing applications. And that's the chloride, that's the corrosion, right? So the mineral taste profile with coffee extraction and you know, soda, so it's not flat, and things like that, that is unique to us, right? Coffee extraction, you know, nobody else is messing with that but the food service world. Steam cooking equipment, I mean, we're heating to extremely high temperatures, and those extremely high temperatures are what are causing the problems. You know, plumbing in a building is not heating to those high temperatures. So I guess in a perfect world, I would want everyone to kind of explain that food service is unique, and maybe if we could just take that water sample as early in the process as possible, then we know what we're working with, right? If we could just think about it up front. You know, we try to be the water experts as much as possible in this space. But I know that there's just times where they go to the Culligan man, right? And the Culligan man's brilliant at what they do. But maybe they don't know, you know, what to do for a combi oven, right?
Yeah, so I think you're also saying don't assume, even if they talk a good game with softening water or whatever, don't assume or back off that they know food service equipment. That's a really good point. You kind of keep at it.
Right. Yeah. It's there's a lot of misconceptions out there, even to reverse osmosis. You know, reverse osmosis is wasteful, or reverse osmosis is aggressive to my plumbing. All those things are technically true, but with the technologies that we have now in the food service space, we can take away all those concerns for food service equipment, right? You know, we're specifically building to the needs of, you know, our applications. So we can take away their issues with feeling like it's aggressive by having mineral addition or blending technologies, right? We can also take away their whole concerns that it's wasteful, because we have very energy efficient units in the food service space that I have not seen in other spaces. You know, I'm not an expert in industrial and manufacturing and what they're doing there, but I know that we're making great strides in efficiency on our end.
Courtney, on the subject of efficiency and making great strides, with all of this innovation available and this amazing technology available, how is it helping with regards to the biggest hot potato we're facing in the industry at the moment, which is the labor issue? Is there any impact that a good water treatment system can have to a client, to an operator, that just helps it in regard to labor and staffing efficiency? And how does it help?
You know, I can't speak specifically to on-site labor, you know, unless we're talking facilities management. It depends on how involved the facilities people are getting in managing that water treatment system. But when we speak to service agents, right, people who are actually servicing food service equipment, service techs, you know, one of the big things is there's a misconception that a job is a job or a call is a call, right? So if they're deliming a piece of equipment, let's say they're doing it monthly, right? The calls for other types of service is coming in all the time, right? So we don't want them necessarily wasting their time deliming a piece of equipment or cleaning an ice machine on a monthly basis when they could go be spending their time on service issues that are an emergency or that are a higher dollar service call for them, right? So we try to get them more to that planned maintenance schedule with the food service equipment. You know, if they can be able to come twice a year, and I guess I hate to say the word preventative, you know, prevent other problems, then that's a win for us, right? And by doing the right water quality, right water treatment for the water quality and that piece of equipment, then we can them to that planned schedule. So that ends up being better for the end user, because they're not having as many reactive service calls. Now, if that's a facilities person, then, you know, same kind of thing. We don't want them wasting their time delining or, you know, cleaning slime out of an ice machine.
Fantastic.
We would rather have them do the things they need to do on campus, or, you know, that kind of thing.
Do you agree with that, Laura? Do you think planned maintenance is the way forward, better for the end user?
Definitely, because the other thing I think that happens is, especially with labor issues right now, if something does go down, if a piece of equipment does go down, you don't have extra people to be hand washing everything because the dishwasher is down. You don't have the luxury of extra, you know, individuals and just wiggle room. You know, the combi oven went down, so now we're going to have to figure out, you know, adjust our menu, find other ways of cooking, whatever it might be. Like all those disruptions that I think become way more critical when you are lean and mean and quite possibly short on labor. So for me, I would say now more than ever, the more you can get ahead of it and be on top of it in ways other than unexpected labor issues that are inevitably going to pop up, I think that's really wise right now, even if it does mean spending more money, which I know we don't all have a lot of extra either, but you know, it is what it is.
Right.
Better safe than sorry, I guess.
Yeah. Water treatment's a pick your poison. Now or later, you're going to have to pay for it at some point, right? Especially if you have corrosive water, you know, if it's going to be corrosive when heated, or if you are trying to sell a high-end, you know, coffee, you know, you want people to come back. You don't want to lose those sales after a while.
Mm-hmm. And the consistency of it too, I think, is important. Right. Not that water necessarily dramatically changes, but just that the more it's a recipe, the more, you know, again, back to preventive maintenance, so that your filtered water is always being filtered to the same level. I do think that kind of comes into play.
Right. And yeah, to that point, I mean, there's a lot of franchises these days, right? And the franchises, they want to be consistent, or they should want to be consistent, at least in my opinion, right? They should want to be consistent all across the country. I mean, there are some brands of coffee where I know that they're not as consistent, and I know I can go to the one over here and not the one over there, and I can get a good cup of coffee. I mean, is that necessarily good for the brand in the long run? Maybe not, right?
Right.
It's better
so
to
true.
be consistent, and some are better at that than others.
Great answer, Cortney. Thank you. You talk about the long run there. I'd like a final question to you both. What does the future look like in the long term? What does the future look like for water treatment in food service? Where do you see this market? Where do you see the innovation going? How is this all evolving? Over to you first, Cortney, please.
That's a great question. I mean, I think awareness. I'm seeing a lot of awareness. I've been at the company for 10 years now, specifically in water treatment. And the awareness is changing greatly. And you know, I think for the better. We've had, unfortunately, a lot of things in the media that have made people pay attention. You know, the lead issue in Flint really sparked interest in drinking water quality for people. Again, like I said, we take our water for granted, that we can just turn on the tap and it's safe, right? That's not the case everywhere. So awareness is a big part of it. And I think we're just going to get better and better with the technologies, especially on reverse osmosis. You know, we didn't really talk about this yet, but the whole issue in the media about forever chemicals, that might be something that people are seeing out there. You know, PFAS or PFAS, these are industrial chemicals in the process of making flame retardants or nonstick pans. All these things end up getting in the soil, and they're there forever. So there's a lot of technology as to how to get those out and how to eliminate them in the soils so that they're not on our plants. So that there's a big change towards that as well. And I think the use of ozone technology and sanitizing of ice machines. I forgot to mention this earlier, but there's big trends using that technology to cut down on the slime buildup, because that slime is actually airborne bacteria and yeast that can cause health issues. So, the health departments, the states are getting really, concerned about things like slime buildup in ice machines. So we'll continuously see a trend towards needing to prevent things like that as well.
Excellent, Cortney. Thank you. Same question to you, Laura, please. Where do you see all this going?
Yeah, well, and interestingly, just to tag on to what Cortney said in terms of trends, I totally agree about this particular ice machines, and just, for example, hospital systems that we work with that go through and check on a very regular basis and look for Legionella and all types of other things. So their practices are extremely important, but along with that is just their awareness of water quality. So other trends that I see and I'm really liking are really come from other equipment manufacturers, actually. So the dish machine companies that I see that have control panels that are alerting you to water quality or different concerns. I'd like to, I don't know that they are quite there yet. I think there's still room to grow, but the idea that the equipment can monitor the water and tell you, my water coming in is not okay, I need you to adjust it, or maybe that ends up on water filters. And I know in some it is, but in some of the simpler point of use, that to me is a great thing. Just something that flags someone to know, oh, wow, facilities hasn't come out to change this filter. Maybe they missed it, or it was in use, or something like that. So I think technology as an element of having warnings and signals and trying to, I hate to also say it, but with labor being the issue that it is, to kind of make it as simple as possible, so that one, it just doesn't get missed, but also that the person who's operating the equipment may not realize that that's part of the issue. And I also think that in terms of testing water, so on the design side, in a perfect world, and I have to admit, we don't do this on every project. We aren't able to do this on every project, but in a perfect world, to be able to go in and test the water on every single project, and at a minimum, to be able to require that once construction starts, I'm particularly talking like a new building, or they don't have access, or whatever it might be, but that at some point in time before equipment is ordered, particularly the water filters, that the water is tested, that everybody kind of gets together and understands the system. Like, I would love to see that be more an active part of the process and less something, it's kind of like a grassroots effort, I feel like, a little bit. And I'd like to see that be more mainstream. And I think we're headed in that direction. That's why I bring it up. I think that's where at least all of our, like a number of other design consultants that I'm talking to, that's where we're headed. And I would just like us to filter that education down so that we're all doing it, and kind of goes to Cortney, like you said, awareness. But it's a really important piece of it.
It is. As always, communication and collaboration is the key, I think, to all of this. On that point, let me draw this excellent discussion to a close. From reverse osmosis to forever chemicals to Goldilocks solutions and even dead squirrels. Superb discussion. I'd like to extend my thanks to Pentair, Everpure for their support, and to thank, obviously, Cortney and Laura for taking the time and joining us for this really enlightening debate. Thank you, Cortney and Laura. Stay tuned to fcsi.org future roundtables. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.